Welcome to the Get Organized HQ podcast. I'm your host, Tasha Lawrence. Every week, we share practical strategies for less stress and more peace as we dive into all topics life and home organization. I'm so glad you're here for this week's episode. So have you ever been decluttering and you look around and you feel this tension of wanting to have less stuff in your home and in your space and you just want it gone. But then when it comes to actually decluttering, you also want to keep the stuff that you have. You're looking around and you're thinking, I want less stuff, but I don't really know what of this I don't want to have. Have you ever experienced that push-pull tension when it comes to decluttering? If you have, this episode is definitely for you. And I want to start off by telling you that I think this is a really common experience when decluttering. Whenever we look at our space as a whole, it's easy to be able to identify that I want more breathing room in my space. I want to be able to find things more easily. I want things to be easier to maintain and to clean up. And so I believe that the way to get there is to have less stuff. And so that's kind of a up in your head mentality, right? You know that if you had less stuff, probably a lot of these problems would get easier to handle. But translating that into going through item by item and actually decluttering, trashing, recycling, giving away things and getting them out of your space and no longer having them, that is a little bit more difficult. And so I want to dive into what to do when you're in the situation where you want less stuff, but you want the stuff that you have. It can be really hard to let things go. If it wasn't hard to let things go, we wouldn't have people who talk about decluttering and give tips on decluttering and ideas of what to declutter and courses on how to declutter and an entire podcast like what you're listening to right now about decluttering and organizing motivation and inspiration and ideas. It can be really hard to let things go. And there can be so many different reasons for that. For one thing, we live in a society, in a life where we bring things in regularly, and that is a good thing. You need to bring fresh fruits and vegetables into your home so that your family can have something to eat. You need to go to the grocery store. If you eat cereal every morning for breakfast, you need to bring more cereal into your home so that there's cereal to eat again next week. The things that we have, they do not last forever or stay around forever. The same thing is true of even clothing, right? I am just not going to be wearing the same clothes that I wore 10 years ago. I think about my shoes, especially my husband. He is very good at somehow busting out the side of his shoe. I think he has wider than normal feet. I'm not really sure. But his pinky toe, after a year or so of wearing his shoes, it'll be out. There's a hole. You can see his toe coming out his shoe. And we need to go out and get another pair of shoes and bring them into our space. And that is good and right. And so the fact that things are coming in is not necessarily a bad thing. Now, we can have an entire additional conversation about the fact that there are certainly times or situations where perhaps overconsumption or even just consumption of things that are not a necessity is happening, and that could be contributing to lots of things. I know for myself, I can say that yes, I need to go to the grocery store. I need to get us food to eat for the week, but not every single thing that makes it in my cart is something that we actually need to have, right? And that's okay. I think there is so much wiggle room here. Okay, let's call it that. Let's just say that this is a wide path to be on of having the amount of things in our home that we want. And when it comes to bringing things into our home, there is not one right answer. And so when I stand in the grocery store and I'm like, ooh, my favorite kind of chocolate bar is on sale, which by the way, Hue chocolate bars. I am not sponsored, but if you ever see them, HU, they're the brown package with the black letters on them, the cashew butter ones. That is my favorite chocolate bar. Highly recommend. Not sponsored at all. Although if I was, it was a pretty smooth lead-in, right? But anyway, when I'm standing at the store and I see that the Hue chocolate bars, they're on sale, and I love these chocolate bars, and they're not cheap chocolate bars. There's not a right or wrong answer there. Choosing to purchase a chocolate bar or even 2 chocolate bars, it's not the make or break of my budget. It's not the make or break of how much stuff is in my home. And so I just want us to not have a tense attitude towards bringing things into our home, and to also realize that we do need to be bringing some of the things into our home. I needed to buy my husband another pair of shoes last year when his foot came out the side of his shoe, okay? But part of the key is figuring out, okay, we are living in a life where things are going to be constantly coming in, and that's okay, and that's good, and we are not upset about that or stressed about that. But if everything only ever comes in and we don't also learn the skill of letting things go, that's when we're going to get completely overrun with stuff. Now, in the example of my husband's shoes, that one's probably a little bit easier. Literal hole in the side of his shoe. You could see his foot. When you can see someone's foot in their shoe, it is not a very effective shoe anymore, right? And my guess is that if you're listening to this and you resonate with the idea that you want to have less stuff, but you want the stuff that you have, I'm going to guess that you have already gone through and removed a lot of the trash or broken things from your space, or even those like super, super obvious donations. So maybe for your kids or grandkids, you had gotten some toys or books and they were just not super well loved. They always lived in the back of the closet, never really saw the light of day. And your kids or your grandkids have outgrown that life stage now. Those are relatively easy things to pass on to someone else, right? It's like, well, I don't really have sentimental attachment to this toy that is still in the box that didn't really get played with. And nobody that is in this house is ever going to play with it. So we can pass that on. So I'm going to assume that coming into this conversation, most of the really just like easy, low hanging fruit, let's call it that, most of the low hanging fruit is gone. And if not, the really good news is that there is a lot of progress that you can make just by grabbing that low hanging fruit. I think it was Dana White from A Slob Comes Clean who was the first one to articulate to me that you start with the trash. So if you haven't already done that, she is 100% right. You start with the trash. Just take a trash bag, go through the room and say, what in here is trash? I mean, do you know how many times right here on my desk, I have an empty can of Spindrift. I have an empty Icelandic Provisions extra creamy skier container. I mean, if I just removed the trash from my desk, that would be two things gone. So if you haven't already done that, definitely go ahead and do that. But I'm going to guess that if you're feeling that tension with your space and that frustration, you might have already moved past that point of getting the obvious low-hanging fruit taken care of. And so what do you do next? There's things in your space that maybe aren't 100% sparking joy. We're going to approach this the same way that we approach all decluttering. So some of the basic rules of decluttering: always, always, always define the space that you're working with. And so don't dive into, I'm going to declutter the entire house. Let's take every single item in the house and dump it in the middle of the living room, and oops, I ran out of time and now I can't even walk in my living room. We do not want to end up in that situation. And so even when we're approaching this question of, I've gotten the easy stuff, what do I do now? I still feel like there's too much stuff in my house, but I don't know what to get rid of. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to say, okay, what space do I want to work on first? Is it a shelf? Is it a drawer? Is it a kitchen cabinet? Is it a closet? Pick what that space is. Now, the next thing might sound kind of obvious, but I do think it's important to take a moment to mentally prepare that more stuff is going to have to leave your space if you want less stuff in your space. And when we say it like that, we think, oh, yes, of course. Like, that sounds so obvious. Of course, I want less stuff in my space, so stuff is going to have to leave my space. But I think it can be easy to get into decluttering and to get into this mindset that's like, oh, but no, I want to keep that thing. And oh, no, not that thing. I don't want to get rid of that. And yes, we need this to stay here. And if we can go into decluttering and just keep it in the forefront of our mind, I am looking for things that I can allow to leave my space. It is a success when I find things that can leave my space. And in order to get what I really, really want, which is a decluttered home that I can feel at peace in, that does not stress me out, that I do not feel is always messy, in order to get that, I am going to have to find some other things to let go. And it might even be something that you want to sit down and visualize. And this kind of depends on your personality. Maybe you're someone who literally just needs to find a quiet place to sit down, even for just 60 seconds, and close your eyes and imagine, What is that space going to look like? What does your living room or your kitchen or your bedroom look like when you open the door and you walk into it? What would it look like if the countertops were clear? What would it look like if things were put away? What would it look like and feel like if your clothing drawers were not overstuffed and you could open them up easily and you could find what you were looking for and you weren't digging and having clothes hanging out the drawer, things like that. If you're more of someone who likes to write or to journal, maybe you even write down what is it going to look like and have that vision in mind. And that is what we're going for. That vision of a less cluttered space. And then just realizing, okay, that's what I want. I've been able to see it. I know what the finish line looks like. I am really excited about that vision. What can I do to get there? All right, so you've got your area that you're working through, and I would recommend starting this process in a very small space. And so maybe one drawer of your dresser, one kitchen cabinet, something like that. And here's what I would suggest that you do. Take all of the things in that space. And as you go through them and you think, is this something I want to keep? Or is this something that can go? Make a distinction between the things that are a definite, no brainer, absolutely, positively yes, and the things that are, yeah, yeah, I think I'd like to keep that. I realize that if you've been through this space before, that you may think, okay, but everything in this space is a yes. But is everything in the space a absolutely yes, no brainer, we're totally keeping that thing? Or are there some things in the space that are, yeah, yeah, I think I should keep that. And the first thing I want to tell you, because you probably are thinking, oh, I know where you're going. You're going to tell me to take all of the things that aren't an absolutely yes, we're keeping it. And you're going to tell me to get rid of all of them. And that's not true. You do not have to get rid of everything that is not an absolutely positively, I want to keep that yes. But this is really going to help you to know what are the possible candidates for something to get rid of. Because we already said you want less stuff in your space, right? You want that decluttered, more peaceful home. You want less stuff. So let's get anything that's not going to qualify as an item to get rid of. Let's just get it out of sight and out of mind. Okay. So as I sit here looking at my own desk where I'm recording this podcast, I mean, it's going to sound funny, but like obviously my cell phone, that is an obviously we're going to keep it thing. I'm not getting rid of my cell phone. Okay. My planner that I use for work and I write down all of my to-do lists in it and I keep track of things. I'm not going to get rid of my planner. I'm actually using that pretty much on a daily basis. And so things like that, I would suggest literally getting them out of sight, out of mind. And so if you're working in a pretty small space, maybe you can pull everything out and put it on a made bed or on a countertop or on a table and take the things that go back in the space and go ahead and put them back. And then you're left with, all right, here are the things that I'm not just like jumping up and down. Absolutely, we're keeping these things. Now let's start going through with the things that were a little bit more of a tentative yes, or just even a less excited yes. Now we can start going through and asking, why am I keeping these things? Because it's already interesting to note that they're not the absolutely yes, I'm keeping them things, right? When I go through my kitchen, I have really not debated about decluttering our plates. We have one set of plates. I mean, plenty of plates. I don't know. We probably have like 12 plates or something. We'd only have one plate per person, but I only have one set of dinner plates. And I've never really analyzed whether or not I should declutter those because we eat on them every single day. And so the plates are not what are going to go. But I have some dessert plates that I don't use nearly as often. And so those might be the type of thing that end up in the, yeah, I want to keep the dessert plates, but they're not as essential and they're not being used as frequently and they're not as obvious of a yes as the regular plates. And so now we're just left with all the things that they're not quite as obvious. And remember, we're looking for things to get rid of. And so it's a success when we find something that, yeah, I'm good with getting rid of this. Okay. So as you go through the things that are left, the things that you're not as positive, you definitely, no questions asked, are going to keep, start asking yourself why you're keeping them. What of these items are your just in case items? Maybe even make different piles for these different things. So make a pile. These are the things I'm keeping just in case I need it someday. I don't really currently have a use for it, but it is something useful. I think kitchen gadgets can fall into this for sure. Like those different things. I don't know, a pineapple corer slicer. They make them for like every fruit has its own utensil that you can use, those kinds of things, or special appliances like an ice cream maker, right? I almost bought an ice cream maker. I'll have you know, my husband's cousin had a pretty awesome ice cream maker. Okay. So all of those fun gadgets, and you maybe pull it out a couple of times or something like that, but put the just in case items in one spot. Are there any items in this pile that you just feel some sort of compulsion to keep, right? Maybe it was a gift. Maybe it's something that you spent a lot of money on. So, like the ice cream maker, I didn't actually buy it, but like I totally could have seen myself buying it. And so, if I spent like 50 or 60 bucks on an ice cream maker, that might be something I feel compelled to keep because, well, I spent money on it and I'd really like to get my money's worth out of it, right? And I mean, making homemade ice cream sounds great. So, those things, the things you feel compelled to keep. Also, make a pile of things that you're like, well, I really have used this somewhat recently, and keep those things separated. And then we can start addressing each individual case, right? We're going to go on a case by case basis. So let's go to those just in case items. And you've probably heard this rule before, and I've heard it thrown out with so many different monetary values. So I think the first time I ever heard this, I heard it said, if you can replace the item in less than 20 minutes for less than $20, then you can probably part with it. If it's something that you're like, I'm just keeping this in case I need it someday, it's not something I currently use, we don't actually currently buy pineapples and core them and slice them and all of that, then 20 minutes, $20, maybe it's something that you can pass on. But you can make that threshold whatever fits for your family and for your budget, okay? And realize that this is not just being wasteful and saying, oh, I'm willy-nilly just gonna go buy everything I need whenever I need it, but it's allowing you to release the fear of what if I need it someday? Because here's the thing. If you need to cut a pineapple someday and you get rid of the pineapple corer slicer thing, you're probably going to use a knife. Like that is my guess. If you're not a frequent pineapple consumer, then you're probably going to just grab a big knife, chop off the top and bottom of the pineapple, take off the skins of it, cut around the core, all of that stuff. And yeah, it may not be quite as fancy and easy as using the official tool for it, but it will be okay. But sometimes when you're looking at that item, you're thinking, man, if I had a pineapple right now, I would really rather cut it up with this tool that was made for it than using a knife for it. And it just kind of allows you to say, okay, you know what? If I ever end up in a situation where my family is eating a ton of pineapple and I'm cutting multiple pineapples per week and I just absolutely cannot stand using my knife to cut up the pineapples, then I can replace this item if we decide that we need it. But right now, in this season of life, I am valuing having less things in my home, having my home easier to live and move and breathe in. And so I'm going to allow this thing to go because right now in this season and stage of life, we're really not using it. And if down the road that changes, that is okay. And I'm going to tell you that you will get rid of tons of things that you will never need to replace. Okay. So don't keep some running total and be like, okay, well, I applied the 20 minutes and $20 rule. And so now I need to have like $560 in a budget for all the things I might need to replace. No, you are not going to find yourself replacing the vast majority of these items. You will find that you are just glad that they're out of your space, that you have the space for other things that you're actually using. But when that nagging doubt comes into your mind and you're worried like, oh, but what if I really need it? It's totally okay. It is absolutely okay. And another way to think of it is, would you be willing to spend, whether it's $20 or $10 or $5, whatever that amount is that you've set, would you be willing to spend $20 to have a less cluttered space? Like if someone came to you and was like, hey, give me 20 bucks, your space is less cluttered. Would you do that? And so that is essentially what you're doing. Even if down the road you have a grandchild, they love pineapple and you're eating pineapple all the time, well, okay, you spent $20 in order to have a space that was only filled with the things that you needed for all of those years that you didn't need the pineapple corer slicer. And of course, for each person, that's going to be different. And there's nothing wrong with single-use fruit tools. I'm not here to say that at all. I think there are some really useful single-use gadgets out there if you are a family that is regularly making use of those single-use gadgets, okay? So I know I'm kind of picking on those single-use kitchen gadgets, but it really is just you and your life circumstances And in a lot of cases, when we're talking about just in case items, it's not something that you're using on a regular basis. If you were using it every day or every week or even every month, it probably would have been in your absolutely yes, we're keeping this category. It ended up in the yeah, that's useful, we should probably keep it category because it has a use. You can visualize using it, but it's not currently being used. And so that is one way to approach some of your just in case items. Now, you're probably going to have some just in case items and they go back into the drawer or back into the cabinet, and that is okay. Just because it wasn't a absolutely I want to keep this yes item doesn't mean that it's a failure to keep it. We are just seeking out which things we can have a little bit of a finer tooth comb as we go through and which things we can pull out. So let's talk about things we feel compelled to keep. I think this is another really big one. So let's talk about gifts. Gifts are a struggle. And I'm saying that as someone who is a huge gift giver. I love giving gifts. I love receiving gifts. I feel so loved when I receive gifts. And I am way more likely to keep something for a long time that I was given because I feel loved that I was given it, even if it's not something I would have ever bought for myself. Okay. So I just want you to know, I totally understand the gift exchange thing, both on the I love giving them to people and I love people loving the gift that I gave them, and also on the side of I love receiving gifts and it makes me feel super loved and appreciated. And all of the emotions tied up in that can be really tricky when it comes to decluttering. Okay, so let's just get one thing out of the way right here. If you're trying to declutter, have less things in your home, and it's approaching a birthday or a holiday or something like that, I would recommend giving specific requests and suggestions. So if you live in a gift giving family and you're trying to have fewer things in your home, then you can actually kind of preempt some of that by saying, hey, I am really trying to declutter more. I'm trying to have less things in my home. Could we all go out and see a show or go out to dinner for my birthday instead? Or, hey, could I get this one gift? I would love it if everyone in the family who wanted to give me a gift would go in on this one slightly more expensive thing that I would really, really use instead of everyone giving me a small gift and then I want to keep all of them. Okay. So I just want to throw that out there. Now, we're going to talk about what to do with things you've already been gifted. Those are the things in your pile, right? We already sorted these things out. But I just wanted to plant that idea that if you're going through this work of decluttering and receiving gifts is a thing that is really a hang up for you over and over again, and you have a lot of gifts in your space, maybe a conversation like that could be helpful. And I will say, as someone who is a gift giver, if you can go to the person or the people who are giving you gifts and give them really practical suggestions and express how much you appreciate them giving you gifts and give them an outlet to continue to do that, but in a way that it's not going to cause clutter for you, that can be a win-win. So you don't have to go to them and say, well, you caused all this clutter and I have all these things in my house that I'm not using and it's all cluttered up because of what you've given me over all of the years. Obviously, we don't have to go and say that, but if you can empower them to give you something that you can really use and like, that's a win-win across the board, okay? But what do we do with the gifts that we already have that, okay, we're just not using them, we're not loving them, but it was a gift and I really feel like I ought to keep it? This, once again, is a super, super common feeling. The first question I would ask, how long has it been since you were gifted the item? Because I do think that that makes a fundamental difference, okay? So first of all, if you were gifted the item years ago, it's something and that person, they probably, I am trying to think of what I gave, my sister for her birthday 3 years ago. What did I give her for her birthday? I think I can think of what I gave her last year. One of them. I can't think of what I gave the other one. I have two sisters. And so I'm doing that just to say that people forget so quickly and they probably forget quicker than you do. You're the one who has the thing and you're like, oh, wow. Like, I'm always reminded that you gave me this because I didn't really want it and it's in my space. And every time I see it, I feel kind of frustrated that I have it and also too bad to get rid of it. And so if it has been a while and this isn't something that has come up in conversation in the last 3 years, it's probably not going to come up in the future. And so you're probably safe to get rid of it without anyone really noticing or caring. Also, sometimes it can actually be easy to get rid of a gift immediately. Now, this really depends on the situation, of course. But if you were given a gift, maybe it was mailed to you from a friend who lives out of state, or one of those situations where that person is just, they're not going to know or ask or anything. Sometimes if you can turn around and you can put it in your donate pile right away, that can also be helpful because you don't get the emotional attachment of like, oh, but it was a gift and I should keep it. And so those are a couple of parameters to keep in mind. But if it's been a while, I would say go ahead and let it go. I will say I have totally kept things before because they were gifted and it just hadn't really been long enough since I had been gifted the item in order to get rid of it. I wasn't sure if the person who gave it to me was like gonna come back and ask where it was or if I was using it. One of the things I'm thinking of in particular, it was super small. And so I just kept it in a basket. Like, no, I didn't want it. I didn't want to keep it. And I have since gotten rid of it. It has been long enough that I'm like, okay, I think we're safe. It's been a couple of years since I got that item. But I'll just be honest. I have kept things because they were gifts and because I kind of felt like, it might still come up in conversation that this was more recently given to me. Okay. And so I know that answer is frustrating. Like it's not as cut and dry and straightforward and it's kind of situational. But I just want to tell you that people who declutter all the time, like me, my husband gets annoyed sometimes at how much I want to declutter. He's probably totally fine if I don't do any decluttering at all for the rest of the year. I declutter a lot and I have kept gifts before for a while just to kind of let things settle and make sure that, everyone was happy. But if it's been a while since you were given the gift, it is absolutely okay to let that thing go and pass it on. Now, let's talk about things that you spent a lot of money on. So, I gave the example of an ice cream maker that I almost bought last year because I guess it's cousin-in-law had it was good ice cream, okay? And I did look it up. And so things like that, where you spent money on it, and believe me, there's other things in my house I've spent money on that I'm not using to their full potential, let's just say. But for whatever reason, my mind is on the kitchen gadgets kick today. And so ice cream machine is what came to mind. But here's the thing. The items that you really thought were going to be amazing and you thought you were going to use and you visualized yourself using it and you bought it and you were excited about it and it just did not turn out the way that you wanted it to turn out. Whether or not you keep that item has no bearing on the fact that you have spent money on it, right? Now, of course, if there's some sort of return policy, if you got it at Costco, things like that, and you can take it back and get the money back. Well, absolutely do that. Take advantage of good return policies and return it if it's something, that's in a condition that you can return and all of that. But in general, we're probably talking about things that, yeah, like it's past the return window or it's just a little too used. We tried to use it a couple times and just didn't really work out the way that we wanted it to. And now what do I do? Because I spent good money on this and it just didn't turn out the way that I wanted it to. And I just want to tell you that absolutely everyone has made purchases like that for a wide variety of reasons. Maybe the item just did not perform the way that you expected it to perform. You were expecting it to do something. I'm thinking right now of Laura's been telling me all about, I should call it the saga of her robot vacuum and mop. And that thing, it cost money, right? Like robot vacuums are not cheap. And it has not been performing the way that she hoped that it would. It's actually been causing some stress and problems. I remember her telling me it picked up a paperclip, unfolded it, and started dragging it across the floor, scraping up the floor because it got stuck in the little suction thing of the vacuum. Okay. So things like that, where there are people who have robot vacuums and love them. I have one and I absolutely love it. But the one that she got, it's just not working for her and for her home. And so everyone buys things and spends money on things that turn out to not be what they thought. Whether that be a big thing and it has some functionality issue and it's not working the way you wanted, or it might just be a sweater and you were like, I'm going to wear this sweater all the time. And you got it home and it didn't match anything that you had, or it didn't fit as well as you thought that it did. And it's hung in your closet and things like that. And so you do not have to keep items just to try to get your money's worth out of them. Okay. You are allowed to get rid of things that you spent money on if they are not serving you and serving your home. If you would not buy it again, you would not put it in your space again. I know that that can be kind of stressful, kind of guilt inducing. It's like, oh, like I wish I hadn't bought that thing. And that's not a great feeling to have. But here's the thing, if you keep that item because you feel guilty that you spent money on it and you didn't use it, every single time you go through your space, you're going to experience that same, oh, I want to get rid of this, but I didn't really use it. Like that guilt, it's going to come back. It is going to feel the same way every time you encounter this item. And so let's just face that head on. Let's deal with it once and for all. Add that item to the donate pile or wherever it is that it belongs. And then you never have to experience that feeling over that item again. And I think you'll be surprised at how quickly it becomes out of sight and out of mind. And so I get it. It is uncomfortable in those moments and it feels bad. And you're like, oh, I can't believe I spent money on this. But it's going to pass and you're going to feel better in the long run that that item is out of your space. I do want to touch really quickly on a specific thing that I know can be really tempting to keep. It can feel like it would be really useful, and that is boxes. We actually live in a time where you can order things in really nice boxes. And I mean, I can't really be down on that because if you've ever ordered the home headquarters binder or the Get Organized HQ planner, like we put a lot of thought and design into those boxes. And I am going to let you in like on a little trade secret here, okay? So we're going to talk for just a second about why are the boxes so nice? And to be honest, it's because whenever you are selling a product, you want the first impression of that product to be excellent, right? And so if someone buys our planner, we want them to feel good as soon as they get the planner and to be like, wow, like I'm super excited about this planner. And so our box is designed to make you feel good. Apple is like king of this. Have you ever opened a brand new Apple product? Like, man, the dopamine hit just from opening up an Apple box and like it has the little pull tabs and you like pull it all the way around and take off the screen cover and all of that. Like it is a joy. I think if someone just handed me like 20 boxes of iPhones to sit there and open and take packaging off of, like that would be an enjoyable 20 minutes to sit there and just open Apple boxes, right? And so you have this box and that box, it gave you joy when you got it. It did its job. And I'm here to tell you it was designed to give you joy because the people who created that product, they wanted your very first encounter to be a positive one, okay? And I'm not down on that. We do that at Get Organized HQ. I enjoy opening the Apple boxes, okay? It's all part of the experience, but I wanted to explain that to you so that you can understand why do I feel emotional attachment to a box. And I'm just telling you, they designed the box to make you feel some emotion about the box. But it did its job and it is okay to let the box go because you're not going to use it for something else. And so things like that, just recognizing like, wow, that was a fun box to open. I'm probably going to have to replace my phone again. I'll get another box in the future. There are all sorts of great boxes in the world. And just recognizing that just because it made me feel something when I opened this box, it doesn't mean that I have to keep the box forever, right? So I just wanted to touch on that because I know I've had the boxes before too, right? You keep those boxes for so long because it's just such a nice box. You hate to get rid of it. And it is okay. It's okay to get rid of the boxes. So if that's in your pile of feels compelled to keep items, I just wanted to give you permission right here that it's okay to get rid of the boxes, but I totally understand that. I mean, they're fun. They are fun boxes. And I will say, if you really, really love those boxes, you could also repurpose them all in favor of shopping your house whenever you're doing organizing. And so if you actually have a space where you could store things in them, then that might be another option for them as well. But I just want to touch on that there. So we've gone through just in case items. We've gone through items you feel compelled to keep. So what about something that you have actually used within the last 6 months to a year, but you're just kind of like, ugh, this takes up a lot of space. And oh, guess what? It's another kitchen gadget. This really was not on purpose, but yes, another kitchen gadget that I can use as an example, my salad spinner. You have to have a salad spinner if you're going to cut up lettuce and wash it and you want it to dry. I have not found another method for drying lettuce, but my salad spinner drives me a little bit crazy. Do you know how big salad spinners are? Like they are very large and they serve one purpose, and that is to dry out your lettuce. And I do make some salads, especially in the summer. I like to make a good like grilled chicken salad. It's wonderful. I'm excited for summer and grilled chicken salads. But It's so annoying to have a giant thing. And so that is the kind of thing that I look at and I think, man, I have used that in the last year and I probably need to keep it because I'm going to make a salad again. But I do not want to keep it. It takes up so much space and I want the breathing room and I want the space. So when you come to something like that, obviously, it is an option to say, I want that thing gone more than I want the convenience of what it's providing me. And so I am going to set my lettuce leaves out on the counter to dry whenever I make that. I am only going to buy pre chopped lettuce, things like that. You can come up with some other solutions. Or what I would recommend is seeing, is there somewhere else that I can keep this item? Now, we do not just want to go stashing all of our stuff somewhere else and making it cluttered. But if it's something like a salad spinner, you don't have a lot of storage space in your kitchen, but you're like, I really am going to use this whenever I make salads. Is there somewhere else you could keep it? Is there a shelf just outside the door in the garage that you could put it in? Can you put it in a basket on a bookshelf? Nobody knows what's in that basket, I'm thinking specifically, I guess, of those cube storage things. I use them as my bookshelf, but I could take my salad spinner, put it in a cube storage bin, and put it away. People don't come to my house and open up the cube storage bins. Is it weird to keep a salad spinner in there? Yeah, that is not what I would expect people keeping in their cube storage bin. But my cube storage bin is right there next to the kitchen. It would not be hard to go over there and grab my salad spinner, and it's totally fine. And you know what? If someone did come to your house and find out that you kept your salad spinner in a cube storage container in your living room, they'd probably think it was genius because I think anyone who's used a salad spinner knows that they're obnoxiously large. So, trying to think outside the box. Is there somewhere else that you can keep that item? And especially if it's something you're only using a few times a year, but you're definitely using, not having that take up your prime real estate. Making sure prime real estate, that means the really easy to get to drawers and cabinets, is the things that you are accessing every single day. That is going to make your life a lot easier. And then the last thing I would say, if you want less stuff, but you feel like you want the stuff that's in your home, do not forget about making a maybe pile. This has probably been one of the biggest game changers for me personally when it comes to decluttering, having a pile of things I might want to get rid of because it allows me to try on life without those things. And so take the things, put them in a corner of the closet and see, how does your space function and feel without those things there? Do you miss them? Do you find yourself going to that box, digging through it and finding that item? Or are you really not missing those things at all and super loving your space now that it's more open and free? And so I think that if you're struggling to pass things on or get rid of things, putting them in a maybe pile where you can be kind of non-committal, you get to try it on without permanently getting rid of those things right at first. That can be super effective. And what I have found when I've made maybe piles is that if I go through that pile 6 months later, for the most part, it's a lot easier to get rid of those things because they are not coming out of my space. They're just coming out of a closet where they were sitting. And it was kind of in the back of my head already that those things were probably going to go. And in general, those things have been a lot easier for me to get rid of. So that's another super effective strategy that I've found for decluttering. Now, I do want to touch really briefly on the fact that sometimes you might feel like you want less stuff in your house, but what you actually need is systems for the stuff that you have. So having less stuff can make a really big difference in your home, but it's not the only thing that is going to keep your home tidy and clean, right? So if there's 4 people in your home and you have 4 plates, 4 cups, 4 forks, 4 knives, you still have to have a system in place for washing all of those things so that you can regularly be using them. It's true, you can't have piled up dirty dishes if you only have 4 plates, but you can still have 4 dirty plates because that's what your family is going to be using, right? And so we may dive into that in a later podcast episode, specifically about setting up systems for the stuff that is left in your home. And that is one last reason that you might feel like you want less stuff, but you really want the stuff in your home. It could be that you're ready to move into that step of setting up maintenance systems for your home, for keeping things tidy and keeping things under control with the things that you do have. And it may be more of a system solution rather than a decluttering more solution. So just keep that in the back of your mind. But hopefully these tips that we've gone over today can help you declutter more things, have less stress and more peace, more breathing room and space in your home. I want that for you because I know that it has been such a blessing to me in my own home. It has made a really big difference, even in seasons of life when I've been super stressed about external things that I can't control. it is really nice to be able to sit down and relax in my home and to not feel stressed out by my home. And so hopefully these tips can help you with that. And I will see you in the next episode. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Get Organized HQ podcast. I hope you found something that you can start applying right away for less stress and more peace in your life and home. Can't wait to see you next week.